I still have the envelope in a drawer in my kitchen, sealed, slightly water-stained along the bottom left corner, my grandfather's handwriting in blue ballpoint across the front, my name, and underneath it, the words, "When the time is right." My brother thought it was a birthday card. My father thought it was nothing. I almost believed them. My grandfather passed on a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks before my wedding. We didn't postpone. He had made me promise we wouldn't. I already bought the suit, he told me from his hospital bed, and even then he was trying to make me laugh. He was that kind of man. The kind who spent 40 years as a machinist in Hamilton, Ontario, raised 3 kids mostly on his own after my grandmother died, and never once complained about anything except the Leafs. He taught me how to drive in a Canadian Tire parking lot on a Sunday morning. He called me every birthday at exactly 7:14 a.m. The time I was born, for 29 years without missing once. When he died, I felt something go out of the world that I knew was never coming back. The envelope arrived by courier the morning of my wedding. His lawyer sent it. I didn't have time to open it. My maid of honor was doing my hair, and my mother-in-law was already panicking about the seating chart. So I tucked it into my overnight bag and told myself I'd read it later. I forgot about it entirely until my father found it. We were at the reception hall, maybe an hour into the dinner, when he came up behind me and set it on the table in front of me. He must have gone through my bag. I didn't know that yet. I just saw the envelope and felt a small warm rush. "Grandpa," and reached for it. "I already opened it," my father said. He sat down next to me without being invited. "It's nothing. Just a note and some old account information." I threw the papers away. I turned to throw them away. It was clutter. "He left you a little savings account he forgot to close." I called the number on the paperwork. They said it's basically nothing. Maybe a few $100s. Not worth the hassle. He said this in the same tone he used when he told me my university degree was not worth the paper. He had a voice that's made every sentence sound like a verdict. I had spent 30 years learning to sit quietly when that voice came out. Old habits. But I was 31 years old and it was my wedding day, and that envelope had my grandfather's handwriting on it, and something in me, something that had been very, very quiet for a very long time, decided it had sat quietly long enough. "Which papers did you throw away?" I asked. "The account papers. Some letter." He waved his hand. Old man's sentiment. I excused myself. I found the garbage bag nearest the kitchen. The envelope was there, tucked next to a stack of cocktail napkins. I pulled it out. The letter was still inside. Crumpled now, but intact. The account document was still folded inside the letter. My father hadn't thrown it away. He'd just wanted me to think he had. I don't know why I understood that immediately, but I did. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and read my grandfather's letter standing over the sink. It was 4 paragraphs. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered. He'd written it sometime in the last few months, I could tell, but his voice was completely, perfectly his. He told me he was proud of me. He told me he had watched me become a woman who did things the right way, who didn't cut corners, who showed up. He told me he had been putting money away for me since I was born, in a registered account that he'd structured specifically so it would transfer to me outside of his estate. No probate. No family vote, just mine. He wrote, "I didn't tell your father because I knew what he would do with that information. This was never his to manage. I hope you understand that I saw you clearly. I always saw you clearly." At the bottom of the letter, in block letters underlined twice, "The account is at Meridian Credit Union, downtown Hamilton. Ask for the member services manager. Show them this letter and your ID. Do not send anyone else in your place. Go yourself." I folded the letter back into the envelope. I washed my hands. I went back out to my wedding reception, and I danced with my husband, and I smiled at everyone. And I did not say a single word to my father for the rest of the night. But I thought about that letter every hour of every day for the next 4 days until we got back from our honeymoon. My husband came with me to Meridian. This was his suggestion, not mine. I had planned to go alone, mostly because I didn't want to make a big thing out of something that might turn out to be nothing. My father's voice was still in my head, a few $100s. Not worth the hassle. He had a talent for making me preemptively shrink my own expectations, but my husband is the kind of person who shows up. He took the morning off work and drove us downtown and found parking and held the door open and didn't say anything about the fact that my hands were shaking a little. The credit union was quiet for a Wednesday morning. There was a woman at the reception desk who looked up when we came in, and I said I needed to speak with the member services manager, that it was regarding a deceased member's account. She nodded and asked us to wait. The manager was a man in his late 50s, tidy gray suit, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He introduced himself and shook both our hands and led us to a small office off the main floor. I gave him my grandfather's letter and my driver's license and my marriage certificate because I'd recently changed my name and wanted to have it just in case. He read the letter carefully. He set it on the desk. He looked at the account number printed at the bottom. Then he turned to his computer and typed for a moment, and his expression changed in a way I couldn't quite read. Not alarm, not exactly, but something that made him go very still. "Mrs. Aldridge," he said, using my married name, "can you give me just one moment?" He left the office. He was gone for about 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall. My husband reached over and put his hand on mine and didn't say anything. When the manager came back, he had a printout in his hand and a second person with him. A younger woman in a navy blazer, who he introduced as the branch's senior accounts officer. They both sat down. "I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly," the manager said. He looked at me steadily. "You said your grandfather passed in November. You had no prior knowledge of this account?" "None," I said. "He left me a letter at my wedding. I only found out about the account when I read it. And no one else has attempted to access this account since his passing?" Something cold moved through my chest. "Why are you asking that?" He glanced at the accounts officer. She gave him a small nod. "Ms. Aldridge," he said carefully. "Someone called this branch approximately 3 weeks ago, claiming to be your grandfather's executor and requesting information about this account. That caller did not have the correct documentation. Our branch declined to provide any information, but I need to ask, do you know who might have made that call?" I thought about my father standing at my reception table, setting the envelope down in front of me. I called the number on the paperwork. He had told me that himself, straight to my face, not even trying to hide it. Because he had assumed I wouldn't do anything about it. Because I never did anything about it. "I think I know who called," I said. "I think it was my father." There was a pause. The accounts officer wrote something down. "The account your grandfather opened," the manager said, and he turned the printout toward me so I could see it, "is a registered account he began contributing to in 1988, when you were born. It's structured as a designated beneficiary account through an RRSP conversion. When he passed, the balance transferred directly to you as the named beneficiary. That's why it didn't go through probate." Outside, he paused. I waited. "The current balance," he said, "with accumulated growth and the reinvested dividends over 35 years. The balance is just over $412,000. I heard my husband exhale slowly beside me. $412,000. My grandfather, a man who had worked on a factory floor for 40 years, who drove a 2003 Civic until it couldn't be repaired anymore, who bought his dress shirts at Value Village and was proud of it, had quietly, patiently, methodically saved and invested $412,000 in my name and never said a word about it. He invested in mutual funds starting in the early 90s, the accounts officer said, reading from something on her screen. Canadian equity funds, mostly. He rebalanced every few years. He was a careful investor." "He was," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "He really was." The manager explained the transfer process. Because the account was already designated to me by beneficiary, there was minimal paperwork. I would need to provide a copy of my grandfather's death certificate and my own ID, and then the account would transfer into my name and I could decide what to do with it. He recommended I speak with a financial advisor about the tax implications of the RRSP funds, which I would, later. Before we left, I asked him, carefully, what the protocol was if someone had successfully impersonated an executor and obtained information about a beneficiary account without authorization. He looked at me for a moment. That would be considered fraud, he said. We would have an obligation to report it, and the individual involved could face charges. It's a serious matter. I understand, I said. Thank you. We shook hands. We walked out into the November cold. Same month my grandfather had died, 1 year later, almost to the week, and I stood on the sidewalk in Hamilton and I did not cry, which surprised me because I had expected to. You okay? My husband asked. I'm thinking, I said. He nodded. He is good at letting me think. I took 2 weeks. I want to be honest about that. I didn't move fast. I didn't act out of anger. I took 2 weeks and I spoke to a lawyer, and I got very clear on exactly what had happened and what could be documented and what the potential consequences were. My grandfather had left me a letter. The account existed. The credit union had a record of the unauthorized call. My father had told me to my face that he'd called the number on the paperwork. He had gone through my bag at my wedding and opened an envelope addressed to me and found account documentation and made an inquiry to a financial institution, claiming to have authority he did not have. That is fraud. Not complicated fraud, not ambiguous fraud, just fraud. My lawyer, a woman I found through a referral from a colleague, someone I'd never met before and who had no history with my family, confirmed this clearly and without drama. She also told me that whatever I decided to do, the decision was entirely mine, and she would support it either way. I decided to do something. My father has a habit of hosting a big Christmas dinner. He'd done it every year for as long as I could remember, even the years when things were bad between us, because the dinner was never really about family. It was about audience. He liked having people in the room. He liked standing at the head of the table. That year there were going to be about 20 people, including my aunt and her husband, my father's closest friends, my brother and his girlfriend, and my mother-in-law, who had been invited apparently without anyone asking me. I told my husband what I was planning. He was quiet for a while, then he said, "Do you want me to do anything? Or do you just need me to be there?" "Just be there," I said. "Okay," he said. "I'm there." We went to Christmas dinner. It was fine through most of it. The appetizers, the first glass of wine, the polite catching up conversations with people I see twice a year. My father was in his element, moving through the room, laughing loudly, telling stories he'd told before. At one point he put his hand on my shoulder and said to someone nearby, "This is my daughter, the nurse. She takes care of everyone." He said it like he was proud. He always said it like he was proud. After dinner, when everyone had moved to the living room with their coffee and dessert, my father made a small toast. He talked about the year, about family, about gratitude. He mentioned my grandfather, briefly, as an afterthought, and said something about carrying on his legacy. I watched him say it. Then it was my turn. I had not been asked to speak. I stood up anyway. "I want to say something too," I said, "about Grandpa." The room went quiet. My father looked at me with an expression he used when he didn't know what I was going to say, watchful, slightly irritated. I didn't use notes. I had thought about what I wanted to say for 2 weeks and I knew it by memory. I told them about the envelope. I told them about my grandfather's letter, what he had written, what it meant to me. I told them about the account, not the number, just that he had saved for me for over 30 years, that it was already in my name, that it was mine and had always been mine. I told them about going to Meridian Credit Union and what the manager had told me about the unauthorized call. And then I said, clearly and without raising my voice, that I had spoken with a lawyer and that my father had committed fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada when he called that institution claiming authority over my account, and that I had documentation supporting this, and that I would be filing a report. The room was very still. My father stood up. His face had gone a particular color I had seen before, not red, not white, but somewhere between them. He said, "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "I've known for 2 weeks. I gave myself 2 weeks to make sure I wasn't doing this from emotion." I looked at him steadily. "I'm not doing this from emotion." He said some other things. I don't remember all of them because I had stopped letting them land. At some point, my aunt said quietly from across the room, "Richard, she never uses my father's first name." That was the moment I knew that she had known, somewhere, that he was capable of something like this. My husband stood up and stood next to me. He didn't say anything, he just stood there. Eventually, my father sat back down. I set a copy of my lawyer's letter on the coffee table. I thanked everyone for dinner. My husband and I put on our coats and we left. The report was filed in January. The credit union cooperated fully. They had logs of the call, the questions that had been asked, the fact that the caller had identified himself as the estate executor, which he was not. My grandfather had named his own lawyer as executor. My father was not named in the will at all, which I think was part of what had driven him to the phone that day. He had expected to be in that will. He had expected, as he always expected, that things would flow toward him naturally, that they were owed to him, that he just needed to reach out and redirect them. My grandfather has understood this. That's why he'd structured the account the way he did. That's why he'd written what he wrote. The process took several months. I won't pretend it was simple or that it didn't cost me things. There were people in my family who chose my father's side, not because they believed him, but because they didn't want the disruption. My brother went quiet for a long time. That was its own kind of loss. My aunt called me in March and said she was sorry she hadn't said more that night. I told her it was okay, because honestly it was. She had said the one word that mattered at the right moment, in a room where everyone was pretending not to understand what they were watching. The account was fully transferred into my name by February. I took a breath when I saw the balance in my own account for the first time. Then I called my financial advisor, and we talked for an hour about what my grandfather had built and what I wanted to do with it. Some of it went into my own RRSP, some of it went into a TFSA, some of it I put toward the mortgage, and some of it I set aside in a separate account that I haven't touched and don't plan to for a long time. That last piece is the part that still feels most like him: patient, quiet, compound interest accumulating in the dark. My father received a conditional discharge. He has to complete community service hours and he is prohibited from acting in any fiduciary capacity for 3 years. I did not attend the hearing. My lawyer represented my interests. I was at work that day, which felt right. I am a nurse. I have spent 12 years learning how to stay steady in a room where things are going wrong. I know how to read what someone isn't saying. I know how to wait for the right moment, and then act precisely. I think my grandfather knew that about me even when I didn't know it about myself. He left me a letter that said, "I saw you clearly." It took me a long time to understand that the most important part of that sentence wasn't the money, and it wasn't the account, and it wasn't even the letter. It was the word clearly. He saw who I was, and he trusted what he saw. He built something quietly for 35 years, and then he placed it in my hands, and he was right to. I keep the envelope in my kitchen drawer. The letter is in a fireproof box now. My husband's suggestion, practical as always, but the envelope I keep out. It's still slightly water-stained along the bottom left corner. My name in blue ballpoint, when the time is right. He always knew. He just knew.